A small boy sat alone on a dusty road in the middle of a wildlife reserve. His cries echoed through the quiet morning air, each sob carrying a mix of fear and desperation. The wind carried the faint rustle of leaves, and then, from the shadows, a massive lion emerged. Its golden mane glimmered in the sunlight, and its powerful body moved with an air of authority. The boy froze as the lion roared, the sound shaking the earth beneath him. Time seemed to stop as the lion's gaze locked onto the child, and then it began to charge. The ground trembled under its heavy paws. What happened next was something no one could have ever predicted. Zephyr wasn't always the powerful lion he had become. His story began with heartbreak. A young wildlife ranger named Ethan discovered him as a tiny, helpless cub beside his mother's lifeless body. Poachers had cruelly taken her life, leaving the baby lion alone in a world that showed no mercy. Ethan knew the cub wouldn't survive on his own, so he took him in. Nights turned into long, sleepless hours as Ethan worked tirelessly to keep Zephyr alive. He bottle-fed him, stayed by his side, and treated him like family. As the cub grew stronger, Ethan realized that keeping him too close to humans would be dangerous. Slowly, he introduced Zephyr to a lioness in the reserve who had recently given birth. To Ethan's relief, the lioness accepted Zephyr as one of her own. Under her care, Zephyr thrived, growing stronger each day. Over time, he became part of the pride, learning to survive in the wild as he was meant to. Zephyr grew into a strong and fearless lion, standing out with his impressive size and commanding presence. Life in the reserve was both challenging and rewarding. Over time, Zephyr earned his place as one of the most dominant males in the area. He faced fierce rivals in intense battles, proving his strength again and again. The reserve gave him certain protections. Poachers were kept at bay, and if any animal got hurt, a skilled veterinary team was always ready to help. But Zephyr lived just like any wild lion, hunting, fighting, and surviving on his own. Ethan watched from a distance, tracking Zephyr's movements with a mix of pride and concern. Each victory made Ethan marvel at how far Zephyr had come, but the risks of his life in the wild were always there. Little did anyone know, something extraordinary was about to happen that would change everything. The early morning was calm and quiet, the stillness broken only by the sound of Milo's loud cries. The little boy, no older than 3, sat alone on the dusty road, his blue hoodie pulled tightly over his small head. Tears rolled down his cheeks as his tiny shoulders shook with each sob. Suddenly, from the shadows of the trees, a massive lion appeared. His golden mane glowed in the soft sunlight as he stepped onto the road. Milo didn't notice at first, but the lion's sharp eyes were locked on him. When Milo finally saw the lion, he froze, his cries silenced by fear. The giant lion circled the boy, his heavy paws kicking up dust with every step. His gaze was intense, his tail swishing through the air as if deciding what to do next. Milo, too scared to move, sat completely still, his wide eyes fixed on the lion. Then, the lion stopped, sniffing the air. A low growl rumbled from his chest before a deafening roar shattered the silence. In an instant, the lion leapt forward, his massive body soaring over the boy. Ethan's jeep sped down the dirt road, the engine roaring as his heart pounded with panic. From a distance, he had seen the unbelievable, a small child sitting just feet away from 2 lions. As he rounded the bend, his stomach dropped. Zephyr was there, towering over a smaller lion, his powerful claws pinning the rival to the ground. The second lion snarled, struggling to fight back, but Zephyr's strength was unmatched. With one final roar, he forced the rival to retreat into the bushes, limping away in defeat. Ethan slammed on the brakes, his tires skidding to a stop. His eyes immediately locked on the boy, who sat frozen on the road, his small face pale with fear. Ethan couldn't believe what he was seeing. How had a child ended up in the middle of the reserve? And why was Zephyr protecting him? Slowly, Ethan stepped out of the jeep, his eyes never leaving the scene. Zephyr turned to look at him, his golden eyes sharp but calm. Ethan had spent years tracking and caring for Zephyr, but he knew this was still a wild animal. Would Zephyr let him approach? With cautious steps, Ethan inched closer, his heart racing. Zephyr stretched lazily, then stepped aside as if giving permission. Ethan let out a shaky breath and carefully scooped the boy into his arms. As he held the trembling child, questions swirled in his mind. Who was this boy? And how had he ended up here? Back at the reserve's office, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the boy. Who was he? How had he ended up in the middle of a wildlife reserve? As Milo sat quietly nibbling on a sandwich, Ethan reviewed the footage from the boundary cameras. What he saw left him speechless. A rusty, old car pulled up near a weak spot in the fence. A young woman stepped out, holding a small child tightly in her arms. Her face looked tired, her movements hurried. She carefully found a gap in the fence, squeezed through, and placed the boy gently on the dirt path. Before walking away, she knelt down and kissed the boy's forehead. The gesture was filled with love, but also heartbreak. Then, without looking back, she climbed into the car and drove away. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Why would someone leave a child here, in a place where wild animals roamed freely? What had led her to make such a painful choice? He glanced over at Milo, who had stopped crying but still looked uncertain and scared. The questions piled up, but the answers felt impossibly out of reach. Ethan crouched beside Milo, who was now sitting quietly. The little boy nibbled on his sandwich, his big, round eyes still filled with uncertainty. Ethan gave him a warm smile, trying to ease the tension. "You're safe now," he said softly. Milo didn't say much, but when Ethan handed him his phone with a video of playful animals, a tiny smile began to creep across his face. Every so often, Milo would point at the screen and whisper, "Lion," mimicking a soft roar that made Ethan chuckle. Despite the strange and troubling situation, Ethan couldn't ignore the growing bond he felt with Milo. There was something about the boy's quiet bravery that struck him deeply. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Ethan decided to take Milo for a short drive around the reserve. Milo pressed his tiny hands against the window, his eyes lighting up when he spotted Zephyr lying lazily under a tree. The lion's golden mane glowed in the soft, fading sunlight, and for the first time, Milo giggled, tapping the glass with excitement. Ethan smiled, his heart full. Somehow, this child and the incredible lion had become a part of his life. Milo had been saved in the most extraordinary way, and Ethan silently promised to protect him. Together, they drove off into the evening, ready to face the future as an unlikely but inseparable family. As they drove through the reserve, Ethan couldn't help but wonder, what would you do if you were in his position? Imagine being face to face with a powerful lion and a helpless child. Could you trust a wild animal to protect someone so vulnerable? Ethan had seen many wild animals in his years as a ranger, but nothing like this. Zephyr had just proven that he was more than just a wild animal. He had become a protector, a guardian. It was impossible to ignore the bond between him, Milo, and Ethan. This unexpected story shows us that love and trust can appear in the most unlikely places. If a lion can show such loyalty to a child, maybe there's hope for all of us to find connections we never expected. If you were touched by this incredible story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing amazing stories of courage, kindness, and the unexpected ways we find family. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a new video. Could you imagine what it would be like to adopt Milo or leave the situation to the authorities? What would you do if you were Ethan, standing there with a child who had been saved by a lion? It's a story that raises so many questions. Would you be able to raise a child who came from such a wild, unusual situation? Milo's journey has just begun, and his story is far from over. The love and protection shown to him by Zephyr is something truly rare, and it makes you wonder how far you'd go to protect someone you care about. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Could you raise Milo, or would you leave it to someone else? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know if this story moved you the way it moved us.